What is up, guys? It's the Sound Alchemist, part of OneMindSyndicate, and today I'm back to talk about Warhammer 40k. For the longest time, I guess my secret love has always been the Space Wolves. Yeah, you could say they're kinda corny, and they go overboard with naming anything and everything wolf this, wolf that, but the Space Wolves were actually the first minis Gershwin and I bought oh so long ago, so they've always held that special place in my heart. And today, we're going to revisit that special place because of nostalgia and how everybody loves that. I know you guys love the Space Wolves too, don't hide it. So today, we're going to be going into an excerpt from the novel A Trick of the Light, where we have Lucas the Trickster defeating one of the icy krakens on Fenris. So without further ado, let's go ahead and dive right in. "Do you hear me, old wolf?" he growls. "You made a mistake." Lucas did not know the wolf priest's name, and he was certain that the old wolf didn't know his as well. Nor, he suspected, did the old wolf care. What did the gods care for the names of mortal men? "You'll know my name before I'm done." As if in a reply to his boast, the white wavered. The ground shook, a tremor. Not unusual for this time of year. Lucas heard ice grinding and water sloshing. He leapt an instant before the ground split and slammed into the fang of ice as it pierced the way ahead. Water spewed upwards with crackling roars, and a blanket of cold enveloped him. He sprang for stable ground. He would need to run. Despite his fatigue, he moved fast, springing from ice chunk to ice chunk until he was within sight of solid ground. The last spar of ice began to crack under him, and he prepared himself to make one final leap. His hearts were hammering. It wasn't fear. Not really. It was frustration. The thought of dying here, like this, drove him on. Maybe that was why the old wolf had left him out here, to die. The ice exploded upwards, ejecting a profusion of slippery tentacles, encrusted with barnacle-like growths of bone. They snagged him as he leapt, tightening about his limbs. He was jerked down into the water with bone-rattling force. The cold water hit him like a fist, and then he was twisting down, caught in a deadly net of flesh. Kraken mostly kept to the depths of the sea, but sometimes when the waters rose, one would swim inland, only to become caught in whatever shallow basin or lake it found itself in. These unlucky beasts often starved, unless they were fortunate enough to happen across prey. Like, say, one lone warrior stumbling across the ice, distracted by memories and ghosts. Lucas cursed, filling the cold water with a flurry of bubbles. He tore an arm free of the thrashing coils and grabbed hold of a bone spur, holding it back from impaling him. His blood billowed, clouding the water. Through the veil of red, he saw a razor beak roughly the size of a man rising towards him. Eyes like torches flickered greedily in the depths. It was a small one, think the Allfather. If it had been a full-sized one, he would have no chance at all. A tentacle coiled about his throat, bone hooks digging painfully into his flesh. He lashed out with his feet, fist jerking them free, and then kicking away the slashing tentacles. A blow caught him on the back of the head and sent him spinning. For a moment, his mind turned to broken glass. Memories pricked at him, overwhelming him. Gun hailed laughing, screaming, then dying. The feel of hard rocks against his back as the old wolf dragged his bloody carcass to the foot of the Fang and left him there for the thrall servitors to collect. Even then, he'd been underestimated. They had expected him to expire before his training could begin, but he lived, if only to spite them. Lucas had never done as others expected, and he wasn't about to begin now. A coil tightened convulsively about his other arm, and he felt his bones creak in protest. The pain startled him. Snarling, he ducked his head and buried his fangs in the tentacle. Ichor flooded his mouth and throat as he savaged the unnatural flesh. As he hoped, it released him, but not for long. Bone hooks once again slashed down, tearing into him. Krakens were relentless, once provoked. They would cheerfully fight larger monsters, just for a scrap of flesh. Lucas kicked and flailed, trying to thrash a gap in the weaving thicket of tentacles that sought to bar his escape. His much enlarged lungs strained as bludgeon-like blows struck him from all sides. He needed to get clear. He caught a blow on his forearm, letting the hooks dig into the meat and muscle, and sank the newly grown claws of his free hand into the tentacle. He braced his feet against the serpentine length and bit the Kraken once more. The wounded limb spasmed and swept out, carrying him with it. Lucas snapped loose of the tentacle and tumbled slowly through the water. The Kraken still came for him. He began to swim for the dim light above as quickly as his aching limbs could manage. The Kraken rose beneath him. The tips of its beak touched the soles of his feet, and he braced himself as its momentum carried them both out of the water. Lucas flipped through the air as the Kraken twisted in frenzy. Its beak snapped shut, just shy of his torso. He plummeted back down towards the ice, the Kraken still after him. The ice nearly buckled beneath them. Lucas rolled aside as the tentacle slammed down over the spot where he landed. Out of the water, he could more easily discern the Kraken's shape and the squirming mass of its body. It was yellowish in color, stripped with jagged markings of bluish green. Panting, he cast about for a weapon, and he spotted a sliver of ice, as long and thick as a spear, jutting up nearby. This would have to do. He sprang towards it, hoping to reach it before the Kraken recovered. The monster was wheezing like a bellow, its eyes rolling wildly in their flimsy sockets. It heaved itself towards him, beak snapping. Bone hooks thunked down, anchoring it as it hauled itself along. The ice was splintering beneath its weight, and Lucas knew that if he didn't act soon, he'd be right back in the water, all at the creature's mercy. But his hand closed around the splinter of ice, and he wrenched it up, turning just as a trio of tentacles snapped down at him. He dodged one, rolling and backpedaled away from the second, fighting to hold onto his makeshift spear. The third snared his ankle and jerked him into the air. The Kraken made a sound like the shriek of tearing metal and forced itself up, triangular head rising, beak wide open. It intended to swallow him before it slipped back into the water. He twisted in its grip, nearly popping its trapping leg from its socket. It released, and he tumbled towards its open mouth. As he fell, he hurled the splinter of ice at one of the lamp-like eyes with all the force he could muster. Then the beak was closing about him, seeking to grind and pierce him. He caught the dorsal mandible on his palms and managed to brace his feet against the ventral, holding them open. The saw-edged inner curve of the beak bit into his flesh, elicit fresh agonies from within. The Kraken was thrashing about, squealing in what he hoped was pain. Its muscles jerked, and the pressure on his limbs increased. Strong as he wasn't capable of holding the monster's mouth open forever. Already the beating he'd taken was wearing him down. Sweat stung his eyes. Lucas swung his head, looking for an escape route. Only one presented itself. With a curse that was almost a howl, Lucas thrust his arms and legs out to their fullest extension, momentarily dislocating the Kraken's jaws. He seized the opportunity to throw himself down its gullet. He would have risked heading for open air, but the chance of the beak snapping shut on him was too great to ignore. This way, he'd at least hope of staying in one piece. The Kraken's throat was a narrow tube of rigid cartilage, lined with curved blades of bone. Lucas snapped several of these off as he slid down, inflicting more damage on himself as he did. He wrenched one free of its mooring and began to hack at the cartilage within. The kraken was writhing in agony, and gusts of hot air rose from beneath him, bathing him in an oily stench. He knew that he had to tear himself a hole before the monster managed to heave itself back into the water. Where he succeeded in creating a crack, he forced the spine of bone into it and levered it into a widening further and further deep. He sank his fingers into the wound and began to pull. A low throbbing sound pulsed forwards. Like the reverberations of some unseen bell, he began to wrench and jerk away until the gap was at least wide enough for him to accommodate its shoulders. Burning torrents of ichor poured over him as he forced himself into the gap. Rubbery purple flesh lay beyond, and he tore at it with teeth and fingers. There was a sound like a cloth tearing, and then a blast of arctic cold washed over him. Lucas, accompanied by a gout of ichor, sprawled on the ice, gasping. Behind him, the kraken made a choked, gurgling sound that resonated through his bones, and then it collapsed. Its tentacles squirmed, striking at everything in its death throes. Lucas scrambled out of the way, lungs heaving. "Bit off more than you could chew, eh?" he said, falling onto his back as he watched the kraken's final moments with dull interest. When it at last grew still, he realized that his stomach was rumbling. And there you have it, guys. This was a pretty interesting bout of Space Marine versus Beast, as we have Lucas the Trickster, or I guess just Lucas at this point, who has just barely begun his ascension into becoming a full-fledged warrior of the sky, because that's what they call themselves on Fenris. They're sky warriors, not quite space marines, at least to the Fenrisians. So he's just been a newly created space marine, and he's being set out into the wilds of Fenris to see if he is indeed worthy of becoming a true space marine and getting his armor and whatnot, his true indoctrination into the Space Wolves. So if you guys like the Space Wolves, let me know of any other named characters or stories that you guys want me to cover, because these guys are pretty badass. I mean, they do take up after Norse mythology, and they've got trolls and whatnot that they fight as well. So if you guys want more of that, just let me know. As always, guys, please like, comment, and subscribe for more things Warhammer 40k. And you can also head on over to our other page, the OneMindSyndicate podcast, where you guys can get a free credit to read Black Library 40k books or any other audiobooks via Audible. And lastly, we do continue on answering questions in another YouTube page for the Greater Wall, where you guys can ask us any question and we'll give you those answers. And that's all I got for today. So as always, thanks for watching, and as always, it's been the Sound Alchemist, part of OneMindSyndicate, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.